On this episode,
describes intense devotion of the locals and even noted armed guards around the Ark's chapel.
Our boy Uzzah was apparently struck dead by God because he touched the Ark.
Ethiopian lore holds that the Ark's final resting place is in the city of Axum. Do you think now that this Ark is more a symbol of faith or an object of power?
It's way more likely that it's a symbol.
Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Dive into these histories, cocktails and conspiracies. Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Uncover those anomalies, cocktails and conspiracies.
Is the lost Ark hidden in Africa? In this episode, we dive into the popular theory that the Ark of the Covenant was transported from ancient Israel to Ethiopia, where it resides to this day. We're going to explore the rich legend behind this claim, the evidence presented by the Ethiopian Church, and what investigators have discovered or not discovered about this tantalizing possibility. Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, whether you're tuning in across the nation or around the world. My name is Shane Skwarek, here with the always eccentric Mr. Philipps. We're back for part 2 of Cocktails and Conspiracies and our journey into the Ark of the Covenant. This is actually being recorded at the same time as our first one, so my drink is half done.
I feel like it just
Did you refill?
Oh, yeah, I freshened up, baby. Come on.
SOB. This guy said he was using the bathroom, and here I am sitting here.
I know, but when I went
wondering how I'm
upstairs...
going to navigate through the next 30 minutes with a half-empty drink.
Gotta be
Full
smarter than
disclosure,
that.
if I disappear midway through, it's because I'm making a new drink. So just be prepared if Tim starts going off talking about the Mets again. That's why.
Listen.
I'm sorry to subject you guys to that.
LMFG.
LMFG. RTL Ready to Rock is really your old thing. And I promise the always eccentric thing is just because it's the only alliteration I had off the top of my head since I had it written down before. It's probably not going to stick around for much longer. I'm going to try to really mix that up, really be innovative and inventive here as we...
Listen, all I want you to focus on is not using the same word more than once, okay?
Yes.
That's all you need to worry about.
More than once this entire episode here. So... in our last episode, we talked about wanting to split these up a little bit because there's so much to cover with the Ark of the Covenant, and we didn't want to just broach it and then brush over each of these topics. And we decided that we were going to really talk about the lore in the last episode and then start to talk about location in these subsequent ones. And so,
you know what they say: location, location, location.
Location is key, ladies and gentlemen. This one is going to take us out to Ethiopia, which is probably not the first place people would think of when they think about the home for the Ark of the Covenant, but it did become popularized by a person that I'd say is pretty damn reputable. You know who I'm referring to?
I don't. Can I take a guess?
Yes.
Graham? Is it Graham? Is it my boy
That's
Graham?
it, right. All right, that's a pretty good
Let's
guess.
go, Graham.
So
Hancock.
Graham Hancock, back in the 80s, really latched on to the idea that the Ark of the Covenant was located in Ethiopia and became pretty convinced about it. And so we're going to get into that in just a few minutes. Before we get there, I want to just, again, give some quick background and historical context of how it could have gotten there, and then we're going to try to unravel it here. There's a lot, so I'm going to try to jump around because I want this to be not just me reading it. We're not the Y-Files, although I love the show. I got to make sure my boy Mr. Phillips is getting his fair share of that Richard Serrett interview. He's going to get payback here. There's an Ethiopian, and you're going to hear this a lot. By the way, check that out. Spotify, Strange Planet. The Ethiopian tradition about the Ark's fate comes from an ancient text called the Kebra Nagas, the Glory of Kings, which recounts the lineage of Ethiopia's Solomonic dynasty. So according to this legend, Mr. Phillips, the Queen of Sheba, called Queen Makata, an Ethiopian lord, visited King Solomon in Jerusalem. She had a son with Solomon, which seems to be a kind of the recurring theme in these all ancient stories, named Melanic the First. Don't know why you'd add the first.
Spicy story.
There's always a little bit of like romance and affairs in a lot of these royalty stories, aren't there? Melanick is raised in Ethiopia but travels to meet his father as a young man. When he returns to Ethiopia, the legend says that he brought the Ark of the Covenant with him. In fact, his companions stole the Ark from Solomon's temple and replaced it with a fake without Solomon's realizing, as if that wasn't a Hollywood movie like Ocean's 11. By the time the Switch is discovered, the real Ark is safely on its way to Ethiopia. And in short, this story claimed the Ark secretly left Jerusalem about 950 BC and found its new home in Africa. Now, if you ask the people of Ethiopia, word is bond, man. This is in the Bible. This is a religious text. This exists here. Case closed.
Yes.
I assume Mr. Phillips' case is not closed for you based on that story.
No, it's not. Well, first and foremost, it's a story. And so you can't take any story as truth, right? Because it's just that. It's a story. It's also not my favorite story in regards to who procured the Ark and where it went.
So Ethiopian lore holds that the Ark's final resting place is in the city of Axum, which is the ancient capital of Ethiopia's kingdom. Specifically, it's said to be kept in a sacred guarded building on the grounds of the Church of Lady Mary of Zion. This church and its earlier structures have for centuries been the center of the Ark tradition. So starting about 3,000 years ago, by Ethiopians' account, they became their protector. The line of Ethiopia's emperors fashioned themselves as descendants of King Solomon and guardians of the Ark. Okay. Again, we go into this guardian of the Ark. It becomes kind of this this mythical lore within Ethiopia that they're perpetuating. They don't need anything else. But so much so that they now have a single monk that has been dubbed as this guardian of the Ark that quite literally is in charge. His whole role is charged with watching over the relic for his entire life. He lives in seclusion by himself in this chapel, and no one else, not even the head of the Ethiopian church, is allowed to go in and see the Ark.
Yeah, I was gonna say, right, like, this isn't just like his job. He doesn't go home to his family. Like,
Nope, this is it.
That's why this dude exists. His sole purpose for being on the planet is to guard the Ark. That's how seriously they take that.
Yes, which to me, we talked in our last episode and many episodes before about the idea of religion and how that dictates a lot of people's lives, and how every religion, they all think that theirs is sort of like, you know, the alpha, right?
Sure.
And there can't always be more than one alpha in the room.
Not unless you have a ponytail.
Right. And sometimes when an alpha walks in the room, you just know it. And in this particular case, sorry, inside joke. In this particular case, you've got this monk there, and, you know, you alluded to the fact he doesn't have a family. That's part of, I guess, monkism's not a real thing, but that's part of becoming a monk. You give that up. The Ethiopians are so dedicated to the idea that they have the Ark of the Covenant there that they are willing to now take this to the extreme of extremes and sacrifice, for lack of a better word, a single person to live this out. When this particular monk dies, eventually, obviously they're not living forever, but when they die, a new one is just selected. There's a new guardian that is now selected. He's chosen by some ceremonious process. And this strict protocol means the Ark is never brought out in public. No processions, which have been paraded around back with the Israelites. And there's no opportunity to obviously examine it. It's, again, such a strong devotion that the Ethiopians want no physical proof whatsoever. It's fully geared on faith and tradition to sustain this claim.
Yeah, I mean, well, look, dude, as far as they're concerned, they don't need to prove it to anybody, right? Because it's their faith, and they believe that strongly in it. So if you put yourself in their shoes, fuck everyone else. What do you give a shit, right? We have the Ark, we know it's here, and this is what we believe in. I mean, for that poor dude, I mean, I look at him as a poor dude, but that's the reason for his existence, you know? Makes sense.
So there is some conflicting stories about how the Ark actually gets to Ethiopia. The Kebra Nagas was written down probably around the 13th century, but the oral tradition of Solomon, Sheba, and the Ark is actually much older than that. So the story was obviously regurgitated once and twice and three times and probably 1,000 times and told over and over again before it's actually physically written down. And this is, again, what we talked about in the first part of this, is how, you know, the idea of all religion and really any story could be manipulated over time. I don't want to dive into the different stories because honestly, they all pretty much start and end in the same place. They start at Solomon and they end at in Ethiopia, right? But the summary of that is that there's the sole custody theory, which is Melanik takes this thing, straps it on his back, I guess, with his buddies, obviously, because we know the Ark's powers here, and brings it on down. They maybe temporarily hit it on an island during a war, but in any case, he's solely responsible for bringing it down. There's the Elephantine theory, which is kind of taking an alternate route. They speculated that it could have reached Ethiopia, but not directly by his son, that it might have been taken through Jerusalem and stolen by other priests, taken down the Nile River to Egypt, so on and so forth. And there's obviously the divine protection legend, which is that the Ark journey to Ethiopia was ordained by God, which is how Melanik was actually able to grab this thing and go with it. Or that the Ark itself might have just flown itself or carried the people taking it to Ethiopia on its own. A little bit of wildness in there.
Like
a lot
wild
of
and crazy kids.
A lot of suspension of belief in all of those theories, which is why, they weren't worth probably diving down individually, because I think the theory states it ends in Ethiopia.
Yeah. My problem with, I don't want to say problem with it, right? But to your point, how do you even begin to look into that stuff, right? Like, the old game Telephone?
Yep.
Right? So every year, me and my family, brothers, sisters, they all have kids, nieces, nephews. We all get together, we go on vacation, right? And one of the things that we like to do is when we're all sitting out back at night is we like to just play telephone. Now, granted, we have a bunch of kids. Yeah, we'll still do it, right? Just for funsies. Just for a little bit of funsies. And now, granted, right, we have kids who want to be silly. And so, it gets really super silly. But, that is kind of the old adage, right? So, you mentioned the story gets told over and over and over again, and this little part gets tweaked here, and that little part gets tweaked here, and maybe not even intentionally, right? Like, people aren't trying to deceive the next generation of people that are being told the story. It's just they just fucked up and got something wrong. So it's really, for me, that's a really tough one to look into.
Yeah, I do tend to agree with that, especially when you start talking about stories that happen before they are written down by centuries or decades even, right? A lot can be construed. You're obviously doing that with your family in a circle within minutes, right? And how much gets manipulated in there. It goes back to what we said before too, is there's a difference between symbolism and reality sometimes, and maybe what's translated in that. However, if we are to believe now that this escapes out to Ethiopia, I guess the question becomes why, what evidence exists, and how do we find anything about it? Outside of really Ethiopia, the claim of the Ark there really isn't regarded. It's not recorded outside of any other Ethiopian sources.
Right.
And the first known reference is from a guy named Abu Salih, a 12th century Coptic writer who wrote that the Abyssinians or the Ethiopians possessed the Ark of the Covenant.
I thought that was Aladdin's monkey that you were talking about there for a second.
Was he Abu, or was that?
I'm pretty sure it was Abu. It was Abu, dude.
It might have been Abu. Yeah, I'm thinking of Apu, Nahasabu Benelon from The Simpsons. Yeah, Abu, you're right.
It was Abu.
It's same general part of the world, kind of, not really.
Sort of over there. There was sand. It might as well have been Arkansas.
Sands, yeah. Oh my goodness, you're not tumbleweeds, not sand over there, bud. We were gonna have no listeners in Arkansas from this podcast. This suggests, though, that by the 1200s now, the rest of the world have heard of Ethiopia's claim, and from that time on, the travelers' reports only occasionally mention it. However, there's no ancient, as in pre-medieval Hebrew or other records that indicate that the Ark went to Ethiopia, and that lack of early corroboration, I think, is what makes people skeptical about it, saying that the story was kind of retrofitted in the Middle Ages to sort of legitimize Ethiopia's then rulers who wanted some sort of a link to biblical royalty. Now, with that said, the fact that there are no Hebrew texts that would refer to the Ark leaving the possession of the Israelites, couldn't that same theory that the Ethiopian rulers were trying to basically elevate their clout, couldn't that same theory be applied to the Israelites, to the Hebrew text? Like, why would you admit that this was then stolen from you and taken into possession of this, what you would view then as a lesser nation?
No, dude, that's a really good point, right? I mean, you're talking about the most significant and important ancient artifact to ever exist, right? I mean, what else is up there when you think about it? I mean, there's nothing, right? It's the Ark of the Covenant is it. I mean, maybe the Holy Grail.
Right.
Maybe the Holy Grail. That's about it, right?
Right.
So, you know what's funny? I almost just said the Ark of the Covenant. It's like the Holy Grail. No, it quite literally
like
is,
Grail.
right? But I'm saying it like as a saying. Yeah. So, to your point, if you're a people, if you're a nation of people, that's got to be a tough thing to swallow, that somebody else came in and just jacked the most important artifact ever in the history of mankind.
Yep.
Why would you admit it?
If you're a people too that is idolizing this, and
Sure.
that your leaders are exalting that they are the chosen ones and they have all this power, and your Bible quite literally uses this as this, choosing my words carefully, this powerful tool or weapon. I'm not going to say, I was going to say W space M space D, but
Right.
not going to use that. Again, being very careful here. This is different episodes, but we reset the timer here. So I think there's a lot of that could happen there. And I think that could be potentially why this wasn't heard of. I got to be honest, and I don't mean to be offensive, I guess, but I don't really know that Ethiopia has been known for anything throughout human history. The only thing that I knew throughout life that came from Ethiopia outside of this Ark of the Covenant story is Starvin' Marvin from South Park. That is quite literally the only time I've ever heard that in any sort of a context in pop culture, notoriety, or historical texts.
Look, I agree with you 100%. I'm sure that there are people that are much more well-versed culturally, globally, in history, and I'm sure Ethiopia has significant history. I don't know about it.
Yeah.
Maybe that has to do with the part of the world that we live in. Maybe it's because it's the
maybe.
time that we live in, whatever it might be. But I don't disagree with you. It's a very odd one-off, right? If you
Maybe
compare,
it's a flash in the pan. It was a short.
right? Yeah. Who knows? It's definitely like, and I'm sure we're going to get there momentarily and talk about the Ark's journey to Europe. When you look at some of the European countries that it supposedly resides in, or at least did at some point, there are a lot of historical things that occurred, right? There's significance to those countries. And I don't mean to belittle Ethiopia, and maybe this is just ignorance of my not having a lot of knowledge about that country, but I don't know, man. It just seems like a very odd place.
Yeah, unequivocally. I'm in line with you in that thinking as well. Before we get to Graham Hancock and his sort of rise to prominence and why the Ark is in Ethiopia, there was a man named Edward Ollendorff, and he was probably the most famous critical accounts. He was a respected British professor and an expert in Ethiopian studies, which again, I didn't realize it was even a thing. But he did state in an
Told you
interview,
there was something significant there. We just don't know about it.
There's something. Yeah, it's got to just be, I don't know when. But
And by the way, and for those of you who don't know, right, like a little bit more inside baseball, I love fucking with Shane and throwing him off as his game and just coming in with these weird little things. If I ever get a pig, you know what I'm going to name it? Ham Hancock.
Yeah, that's throwing me off my game right there. Thank
Good.
God I have notes now.
Good.
This keeps me on track. So
All right,
when I
good.
just did like very small bullet points, Tim would really fuck me up because then I knew nowhere where I couldn't figure myself back in here. But now my notes are more fleshed out, so I can stay on track. Ham Hancock. We'll get to him.
Let's go, Ham Hancock.
So this guy Edward Fast Money, he's basically he says in a British Army he says in an interview that as a British Army officer in 1941, where the British actually helped liberate Ethiopia from Italy, he was allowed to examine the Ark in Axum. He bluntly said, "I've seen it. They have a wooden box, but it's empty. It's a middle to late medieval construction." And according to him, the object in Axiom is a later replica or replacement, not the original Ark of Moses. Timeout. In our first episode on the Ark of the Covenant, Not in Cocktails and Conspiracies, which you can find on youtube.com/@conspiracyrealist, we speculated the idea that the parting of the Red Sea
Yes.
really sounded in alignment to what then later happened in Jordan. And we didn't know timeline wise where that might have fallen, if that could have still been correlated. This, when I found this account from Edward Ollendorf, that's the first time I've seen the ark related to Moses. Thoughts? You look completely, I thought you froze for a second. You look so confounded.
No, I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. I mean,
Now, I didn't read this thoroughly until right now. So for me, a light bulb just goes off because we put those two together.
sure.
So I don't know if that's just a misspeak, a misinterpretation, or if
Well-
there is some other lore that's tying this back to a little earlier now.
Well, I mean, look, the ark. I mean, look, Moses was the one who received the stone tablets, right? The Ten Commandments on Mount Sinai, if I remember correctly. Please don't crucify me, no pun intended if I got that wrong. So I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility that he just referred to it as the Ark of Moses when,
Right.
I mean, he was the one that received the tablets anyway, and that's where they went.
fair.
They went into the Ark, so, you know, it very well,
Okay.
you know,
Maybe a misspeak. Maybe a
yeah,
misspeak.
could be.
There's a lot of miss everything with Ollendorf. The Ethiopian church obviously refuted the fact that he saw anything. And it is puzzling to people how he would have seen it when normally nobody would have. And that, I mean, he speculates that it was not the original one. So maybe he saw a replica or misidentified artifact. But it does remain a kind of a crucial piece of the puzzle for critics there.
Real quick, what was the time period that we were just talking about this dude?
1941.
All right, so that was 1941. All right, so that kind of dispels what I was just thinking of. I was thinking
What were you
about
thinking of?
I was thinking about maybe like Old English speak, right? And sometimes things are referred to in a slightly different variant, and maybe in Old English it was called the Ark of Moses, but that kind of
Yeah.
dispels that if this was the 40s.
I guess depending on where he came from in England, it's not totally out of the realm of possibility that he just
Yeah.
maybe had like a thicker dialect or just spoke in a different way. But I think
Or
most
maybe they
likely,
just used a
yeah,
different
probably
word,
smells.
right? I mean, some churches,
Plausible.
call it the Holy Ghost. Some refer to it as the Holy Spirit. So it's who knows?
Right. Yeah. It's a good point. That brings us up to the 80s, early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, and that's our boy Graham Hancock. And that's really the only validity that I gave to this story because I respect Graham Hancock. I enjoy a lot of the stuff he does. I know you do as well.
Love Graham.
And he's not the type of guy that gives you an answer to anything. He asks questions,
Sure.
right? He doesn't really speculate necessarily. He just asks questions, pointed questions sometimes, and he's often trying to guide you to what he might think the answer is, but he's not going to outright state that. He's open for communication. He's open for discussion, which I like that.
That's-
in
yeah.
any researcher.
That's the best part about Graham is that he doesn't just stand on a soapbox and go soapbox. I don't know what the fuck that is. A soapbox.
It's great.
and
It's
go,
a soapbox. I'm just talking to the people that listen to me. Yeah.
Say you're wrong. This is what it is, and this is why. No, it's more like, hey, I just have a few questions, and these are why I have these questions, and so can maybe we talk about them, and then he just gets shouted down. So to me, that just builds his case a little bit more.
Yep.
Let's go ham.
Well, I guess he decides to go on this expedition through Ethiopia, Israel, and Egypt in the late 80s, early 90s, researching the Ark, and culminates this in his book, The Sign and the Seal, which sounds like a book you're probably going to have to put on your Amazon reading list there, Mr. Phillips. We've referenced this about 6 times already in just these first 2 episodes. So Hancock, after this expedition, again, Ethiopia, Israel, and Egypt, which are pretty much the 3 prime locations for where the Ark is speculated to be, is now convinced that the Ethiopians' claim is truthful. He says he gathered interesting, if circumstantial evidence, the Elephantine Island connection, noting that the Jews in Elephantine had a replica of the Jerusalem temple around the time the Ark disappeared, possibly hinting that they took the Ark, or at least its traditions, with them. Now, before I move on from that, I said the word Elephantine. Does that sound familiar to you?
It sounds like elephantitis.
And it sounds like a weird disease, doesn't it?
It does.
I skimmed over this before. When the Ark left the possession of Solomon and Menelik took it, there was theories that there was the sole possession, sole custody theory, where he went straight from Solomon to Ethiopia. But there was also an alternate theory that there was an Elephantine connection. I'm going to go back to that now. Some research speculated on an alternate route the Ark could have reached Ethiopia, one not directly by Solomon's son. The theory suggests the Ark might have been taken out of Jerusalem by Jewish priests much later, around the 7th century BC. Doesn't matter who about. They might have carried down the Nile River to Egypt, specifically a Jewish community on Elephantine Island. From there, the successor could have traveled down to Ethiopia, perhaps via merchants, and then ended up in Axum as well. But there's a lot of theories by Graham Hancock specifically that it spent time on Elephantine Island and later on an island in Lake Tana, Ethiopia, which also ties in to the theories of the sole custody, where it might have been temporarily hidden in an island monastery in Lake Tana during some of the wars. There's a little connection there, Mr. Phillips. Again, I brushed over that earlier, not thinking that it was much of anything, but it becomes the basis of Graham Hancock's theory here that the local legends from Lake Tana of a sacred objects and the deep reverence of Axum's guardians. Okay. He then interviews the then guardian of the Ark from a distance. I guess you can't get close enough to them. While Hancock couldn't see the Ark any more than anyone else, he says that his efforts brought the Ethiopian theory to a worldwide audience. So again, his work is more part of an investigative travelogue, part historical conjecture. He's not providing scientific proof, but did compile a lot of threads that support the plausibility that if the Ark survived antiquity, Ethiopia is a prime candidate for where it exists.
I like it. I still have trouble with the whole Ethiopia thing. It just still doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But, listen.
Yeah.
If it's there, I trust Graham to do the research and tell me it's there. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, man. And that's where I'm struggling with it too. Because I don't know what Graham Hancock was like in the 1980s, 1990s. He very well could have just been full of shit. He very well just could have been new on his journey and just kind of bought into stories that maybe just didn't have all the answers there. And perhaps that's really the answer to this is, well, Graham's saying this because that's just the way he materialized those thoughts at that particular time. Conversely, now, if he was to go on that journey again, maybe with all, 2-3 more decades, I guess it would be 3 more decades, right? Yeah. Wow. Oh, geez, we're getting old, man. Almost 4 more decades. 4 more decades worth of experience. Holy cow. Of experience behind his belt. Maybe he has a different theory behind it. Most of his experience there, I haven't read his book, so I'm just speculating based on summaries that I've read here, is anecdotal, right? So he's talking to different people. He's trying to talk to the monk who, by all accounts, I believe is supposed to be mute, but maybe they can talk, maybe they can't. It's a little unclear in a lot of what I read here. Because there's another thing I want to get into about that happened in 2007 that seems like they interview one of the monks. But by all accounts, it's all anecdotal experience. And we already acknowledged the fact that these people are devoted to this. They don't need a reason to believe it's there. Right. It's their religion, right? So what does that mean? Are they really giving firsthand accounts, or are they giving stories, the same stories you referenced before? They're playing a game of telephone.
Well, it's not just that, right? So let's just take that one monk, for example, and all of his monkery, or monkism, if you will.
Monkism.
Has he, and I'm talking about the one that guards the Ark, right?
Yes.
How do we know that he's ever actually even seen it? Right? So let's just say, for example, if you have the ability to interview him, okay, let's say he's not a mute and he can speak English, and you could go interview him right now. Who's to say that he's ever even actually seen the thing? I mean, he's just guarding it outdoors. It's not like he's inside of it.
No, he's just how he lives there.
Yeah, but is he actually? But okay, I agree. Yes, but we don't know that he's within the same chamber that the Ark actually is.
Oh, right. Or if he has access to it.
Right, exactly. So actually has access to that. So, it's, and again, right, we're just, at that point in time, we're just taking information from, at the end of the day, some dude, right? So It's tough.
Dude,
It's all just the story.
You're
at the
sitting
end of the
there
day.
guarding that every day for the entirety of your
But
life.
you
You are
think
telling
you
me.
are. But you think you are.
You are telling me that if there's a locked door there, you know that you're here. This is a death sentence. You're here forever. For the rest of your time on planet Earth, you're going to be sitting in this building. You're not going to figure out a way to get inside that motherfucking thing and see if there's something in there?
But let's go back to our boy Uzzah, right? Our boy Uzzah was apparently struck dead by God because he touched the Ark. So if you're that much of a believer that you're going to devote your entire life, you're never going to have a family, you're never going to go out drinking, you're never going to fucking sing Foreigner at the end of the night when the bar is closing down, right? You're never going to experience those things. You believe that much. Maybe you believe that much that you just don't open that door. Who knows?
Maybe you do, but if I'm signing up for a death sentence to be there anyway, I'm going out shot down in a blaze of glory, baby. Zing! There's your little karaoke shot for you. Fast forward, 2007, Smithsonian Magazine sent a reporter who, while not seeing the Ark, describes intense devotion of the locals and even noted armed guards around the Ark's chapel, especially during times of civil unrest, which is obviously going on in Ethiopia. There really haven't been any formal expeditions because the church simply doesn't allow it. But in recent years, there have been some documentaries made, generally unsuccessfully trying to get a peek. Notably in 2020, during the conflict in Ethiopia's Tigray region, where Axum is actually located, there were reports of a massacre near the Church of Mary of Zion. Locals and clergy reportedly died protecting what they believe is the Ark from looting or harm. And tragic incidents underscores that real people today are willing to risk death for the sake of this sacred object. So again, a testament to how real the Ark is to the hearts of the Ethiopians, regardless of whether the physical artifact is the original or not.
You know what just popped into my head?
Yep.
Like I feel like the Ethiopia story for me is so hard to grasp because when you take a look at the context of Judaism and even Catholicism, right? And actually even, you know, anything rooted in those two religions, Ethiopia is just off the map. They have nothing to do with that religion at all whatsoever in terms of, you know, Jesus traveling there. And, you know, it's just so far off that it just doesn't add up to me. It's so bizarre. And I get the backstory that we're talking about here. I get how that plays into it, but it's just so insignificant to me that it's really hard to, it's really tough to.
I agree. I
really
think
think
that
about it.
if you go with the elephantine theory that a sect of Jews breaks away and they bring it with them to maybe reestablish their own, I don't want to say like a derivative of the religion. Maybe they were just still following the same religion. They just wanted to be on their own. But if you follow that theory, it does make sense. And then they sort of branch that off into Ethiopia because that becomes sort of their protectors, and the Ethiopians start looking at the religious aspects of it. It gives them that sense of power, right? And so if you do have it there, you do have a sense of control. You have a sense of worth, it's a sense of well-being to your people. Your religion isn't completely worthless. I couldn't find it for this conversation, but there were stories that some of the monks that would die would often die of things like blindness.
Yes, I have heard of that. Yep.
Right, like where their eyes would like not just go blind, but almost like what's the word I'm looking for, Mr. Phillips? Like crust over a little bit.
I know what you're talking about.
Think of it.
I can't think of a much better word to really explain that, but you're right. But it was almost as if though it's just these bizarre, anomalous ailments, right? That people usually don't fall victim to. And when you look at the series of people who guarded that, it's awfully coincidental that they all had these strange, anomalous illnesses that, you know, through later in life.
Right.
Which brings us back to was it a nuclear reactor?
Right. And,
are they getting a little Chernobylism?
That's where I was kind of going with that whole thing, and I'm trying to see if I can pull it up real quickly here. Yeah, I'm not getting much here. Declining health. Obviously, the isolation can kind of fall into that as well. If they are dying of some of these illnesses, right? These sicknesses, these tumors, these cancers, that does lean into what we talked about in our last episode, where if you are looking at the nuclear reactor, perhaps that is the case. However, you're also living in a third world country, particularly today. So I don't know how far back some of these stories go. There isn't a lot of accounts on it because there's a lot of secrecies, right? So they don't really have any modern documentation, and they're not really willing to share it anyway. So all you're really, again, is going off of hearsay. But that struck me as interesting when I heard those, and it was sort of another reason I leaned into this conspiracy a little bit. The validity that Graham Hancock's stamp puts on it, to me, brought it into the light. And then those illnesses tied into my personal belief that if it does exist, which by all accounts, because of the replicas that exist out there, it does or did, that could be a tie-in right there.
I agree.
The idea of it being true, though, it's tough for me to stomach that, because you look at global history of conquering worlds, and we go back to that World War II example we gave in the last one. If Adolf thinks that the Ark of the Covenant is in Ethiopia, we don't know that he did or doesn't. We don't know. He can waltz in there and wipe that country out in a second, take over that temple and get it. And you have to wonder, like, it wasn't the only conqueror, right? You got the Persians, you got the Romans, modern colonial powers. If anybody thinks that it's there, they're coming in and they're taking it. Ethiopia's not a strong enough country. No. Again, we didn't even know that there's any relevance to it to this point. So I don't know that there's any real significant period in history that it's got enough strength to defend itself. And so, kind of ironically, the fact that they are so secretive about it, if they do have it, protects them, because they're just not really saying one way or another, but they seem to think it.
Yeah, but to your point, right? I mean, look, it's reported that Mussolini was actually in Ethiopia looking for the Ark, right? Which, going back to World War II, right? The axis of evil. Mussolini surely had an army and had arms way more powerful than that of Ethiopia. He was in there looking for it. You think that he didn't fucking go in there? Are you kidding me? So, I mean,
hard pressed not to think he did.
Yeah, I mean, come on. And so, again, that's another thing for me that, man, if it was there, but it's kind of twofold. So if it was there, it ain't there anymore, because guess what? Mussolini did get it, okay? And maybe that's how it made its way back to the Vatican. Just thought about that.
Oh, Mr. Philipps. Whoa.
A little Italian tie there.
Now we really have to go into the Vatican archives.
I know, right? Or it was never there to begin with.
Right.
Who knows?
First impressions coming into this episode, did you believe it was in Ethiopia? Did you know Ethiopia theory even existed?
Yes, I knew the Ethiopia theory. Watched many a program. I feel like an old man when I say that. Many a program of the Ark being in Ethiopia in that church. Do I think it's there or was ever there? No, probably not.
Leaving this episode, do you feel any different about it?
Yet, as they say over... Oh, I shouldn't say that. That's a bad word. Is it bad on YouTube?
I don't know.
No.
We're going to find out
soon. I correct
soon
myself. No.
N-O. That's what I said.
N-O. I said no.
Does Graham Hancock's involvement for you change your perspective on whether or not it could have validity in that theory?
It makes it a bit more interesting. And actually, I forgot, I'm sure I did at one point, but I forgot that it was Graham who popularized that theory. And as much as a fan of Graham as I am, it doesn't make me feel much differently about it. No. Yeah, I believe much more so that it probably ended up in Europe, which we'll tackle at some point.
Okay, well, that would be my next question for you. If it's not in Ethiopia, where do you think it'll be?
Well, because I love the Templar theory.
But I found these results on search.
Oh, the Google machine's talking to you. You creep.
Somebody said the wrong name. Uh-oh. Somebody is listening out there.
Yeah, see? They heard me say "niet," and there we go. Here we go.
You're on earbuds, too. I don't even know how that's possible. I know. So where did you think it would be? I missed that.
So because I love the Templar theories, I think that it's far more likely that it ended up in either Spain or France or possibly even Scotland, in the Rosslyn Chapel.
Okay, interesting. Those are three that I didn't even consider.
Yeah, well, we'll have to talk about that in future episodes.
Well, so that's, man, it's the first time I'm using it for this episode, but it'll be the third time for tonight since our dual episode recordings. That's a perfect segue, Mr. Phillips. That's where I'd want to close this one right now, because our other discussion was really going to be about the Temple Mount. And that's basically saying that it's still in Jerusalem. It maybe circled around a couple times, but I don't find that one to be any more compelling than anything we've talked about, period. What I think we have an opportunity for, and this is for our listeners out there, if you want to hear these stories, is we have an opportunity to talk about the Vatican archives. We have an opportunity to talk about the Knights Templar and their own standalone episodes. And I think we can build those episodes off of, well, the Ark of the Covenant, and then kind of get a full picture on what each of those are. Because I don't think the Ark and the Templar and the Ark and the Vatican stand alone. I think those are big stories where the Ark sort of just plays a factor in them. And I think it's a nice place for us to close out this chapter. And to our audience, welcome you to come back and talk to us about Knights Templar, which Mr. Phillips is going to take the reign on that one because I'm very, very raw on that one, very virgin on that one.
RTR ready to rock.
And Todd Feehan, we're calling you out again. I think it was on the last episode we called you out before, but Vatican Archives, we're going to get you on the schedule because we want to do that too. And that'll be, I guess, it's actually going to end up being 4 parts for that we're going to cover Knights Templar, but I'm sorry, that we're going to cover Ark of the Covenant here. So, Mr. Phillips, no to Ethiopia. We're going to have to do a lot of homework and some historical context here onto, I guess, at what point they were some sort of a juggernaut power that people really gave a shit enough to start marching through there.
I don't know about any.
But do we still think the Ark exists at this point?
Probably not.
No more convinced before. You just still think it's a story.
Probably not.
Even though there's replicas now, there's a replica, confirmed replicas in Ethiopia, confirmed replicas in Jerusalem. Still don't think it exists as a physical, actual device.
Probably not. Look, I mean, there are replicas of everything that you could possibly imagine.
Sure.
You know,
sure.
I don't.
Okay.
Look, you know me, dude. And listen, and we talk about it all the time, right? Like, we want to believe in these things. Why? Because they're fun. They're miraculous. It's like, oh my God. I think it's probably far more likely that it's just symbolism. It's the easiest theory. It's the easiest theory. Easiest theory is probably the true one. Sorry, everybody.
I don't know why. A year ago, I wouldn't have thought this, but I think today, as we stand here and record this on, what's today, March 26th, I feel like it existed in some capacity. I don't know why. I don't know how to describe it. I don't know what's making me think that. I don't know the context of what it was or what his powers were. But that's what I'm going to run with, that it existed in some capacity.
Well, listen, dear Lord Jesus, if it does or did actually exist, I'm sorry. I just didn't know.
Well, hopefully the wrong people don't get it in their hands. But we'd love to hear what you think out there in internet land. Leave a comment on Spotify. We've been replying to them. Comment on YouTube, we reply to them. Comment on Rumble, because all we get are spam comments that try to sell us on some cryptocurrency stuff. But if we don't respond, I apologize. I'm tired of getting the notifications for them every 5 seconds, so I just ignore them all now. We're on X, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, conspiracyrealist.com. You can get all your favorite links right there. And by now, you should be able to find us in any podcast platform. I guess that gin's starting to settle in a little bit now, Mr. Phillips.
Oh, baby.
That is it for us for tonight. We will see you again. Cocktails and Conspiracies. Click that like, click that subscribe, and join us again for Knights Templar and for the Vatican Archives. Raise your glass to mysteries, ladies and gentlemen. It's Cocktails and Conspiracies.
Deuces.
So long.